Hello once again everyone and welcome to another video. This time we're going bigger and bolder than we ever have before. A British icon that could outrange any enemy, silly enough to get on the business end of its gun and tough enough to shrug off a nuclear blast and keep its crew in the fight. Assuming the engine didn't break down. Today, we got for a ride in the British Chieftain main battle tank in a very, very striking camouflage pattern. So let's button up and roll out. The model for the video is the Chieftain Mk5 in 1/35 scale from Tamiya. Originally produced in 1965 and getting new parts or new tooling at various times over the years, with this iteration entering circulation in 1976 with new box art in 1987. Inside the box you will find two very easy to read instruction booklets, one in Japanese and another in English-German, a tip sheet, 6 dark green sprues containing 141 parts, 2 rubber tracks and a water transfer decal sheet, with decals for up to 3 paint schemes. Of course you can always find another scheme to replicate. You can pick up this kit from most modeling and hobby shops or online retailers for about the £20 mark before delivery. This kit is really good. As to be expected with a Tamiya kit, it just fits together with no stress and no really fiddly bits. Almost every part has something to hook on, slot in, or butt up against. The only bits I found a little tricky were the tracks and actually making the radio antennas from melted and stretched bits of leftover sprue.
And the paint job?
Yeah, that was challenging. But that was my choice, not a problem with the kit.
Oh yeah, that was definitely your stupid idea.
Looks good though.
Actually it really does. I wasn't convinced at first, but seeing it done, it looks great. Despite all the swearing it caused.
All worth it, an artiste must suffer for their craft.
Artist? Don't flatter yourself.
Where was I? Oh yeah. Great kit, joy to put together, a perfect starting point for beginners who want to do big-scale armored fighting vehicles. Technical specifications. Type, main battle tank or MBT. Country of origin, United Kingdom, British Army. Service life, 1965 to 1996, British Army. Users, British Army, Iran, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait and Oman. Number built, 1896, 900 for British Army, 996 for export. Cost, £90,000 to £100,000. For the Mk5. Mass, 55 tons. Overall length, 10.8 meters, 35 feet 5.2 inches, gun forward. Hull length, 7.5 meters, 24 feet 7.3 inches. Height, 2.9 meters, 9 feet 6.2 inches. Width, 3.5 meters, 11 feet 5.8 inches. Armor, glacis 127 mm. Hull sides 50 mm. Turret 240 mm. Power plant, a post-piston engine Leyland L60, diesel, multi-fuel compression ignition, 750 brake horsepower, 560 kilowatts. Range, 500 kilometers, 310 miles. Maximum road speed, 43 kilometers per hour, 27 miles per hour. Cross-country speed, 30 km per hour, 19 miles per hour. Crew, 4. Driver, gunner, loader, and commander. Main gun, 120 mm L11A5 rifled gun with laser rangefinder firing 2-part ammunition APDS, APFSDS and HESH projectiles. Secondary armament, 2 7.62 mm machine guns, 1 coaxial, 1 on the commander's cupola. Fire control system, TOGS. Thermal optics, gunner sight. Other equipment, 2 6-shot smoke dispensers. 1 bulldozer blade, issued at 1 per squadron. So while the British may have been the first to develop the tank and what was essentially the doctrine of blitzkrieg or lightning war, British tank design and performance was lackluster during the Second World War. Often lagging behind in one area or another and sticking to core types, a cruiser tank and an infantry tank, which had very defined roles, and if deployed in a task outside that role, they struggled. This idea of a universal tank drove the development of the Centurion, a tank that balanced all the stats on the iron triangle. Lethal, protection and mobility. The Centurion didn't really make it in time to serve in the Second World War, unlike its American counterpart the Pershing. The Centurion, when it entered service, was one of the kings of the battlefield. It could easily deal with any opponent it may have come across. It received constant upgrades, going from the 17-pounder gun to a 20-pounder and eventually to a 105mm L7 gun, which was a very good gun and was adopted widely across NATO allies. The Centurion sold well too, many nations bought it and loved it. So what was the problem? The new Soviet heavy tanks, the IS-3 and IS-4. These beasts had way thicker armor and way bigger guns. Now, while the 105mm gun was potent and armor on Centurions was good, it was feared that neither would deal with these very heavy Soviet tanks. To counter these, stopgaps were rolled out. The Carnarvon, an up-armored Centurion with the 20-pounder gun, and the Conqueror, a Carnarvon with a 120mm gun, entered service. There was also the FV4005 Centaur, aka the Doombarn, with a whopping 183mm gun, and the Conway also floated around. These tanks, designed to complement each other and cover each other's flaws, were never going to be a long-term solution, especially if the Cold War turned hot and Soviet tank columns started pouring through the Fulda Gap and rammed the Berlin Wall. In 1950, British tank designers set to work combining the best bits of all of the mentioned tanks and prototypes. A tank with excellent protection, a deadly gun, and mobile. The concept of the Chieftain was born, gun, minus the autoloader and gadgets from the Conqueror, on a hull as versatile as the Centurion. By 1954, what would be Chieftain was laid out, an evolutionary design with a long-range, high-velocity gun and a bag-charged ammunition system, achieve a fire rate of 10 rounds per minute in the first minute, dropping to 6 rounds per minute in the following 4 minutes, protection from medium-sized artillery, better frontal armor than Centurion and better gun depression than Conqueror. In 1957, NATO required that its forces should use multi-fuel engines, as in wartime traditional fuels may become scarce, so having an engine that could run on petrol, diesel, aviation fuel, cooking oil or captured vodka supplies would handy. This led to the infamous L60 engine, what most would consider Chieftain's biggest flaw. More on that later. 1959 saw the first prototypes handed to troops for trails, and a number of changes were identified. Improvements to address excessive engine vibration.
That's still a problem now.
Ironically, yes. And cooling problems. The rear of the hull was redesigned to accommodate the changes and bumped the weight to over 50 tons. The suspension thus had to be strengthened to compensate. Track pads were installed to protect roads and ground clearance was increased. These changes were accepted in the early 60s. In the latter stages, Britain collaborated with Israel on development with the view to purchase and domestically produce Chieftain for themselves. However, after 2 prototypes conducting a 4-year trial, this fell through, as Britain, at the time, was more friendly with Arabian states and Jordan. Israel then went off and started its on-tank program. The final design that entered service had several defining features. It had a heavily slopped hull and turret to greatly improve the effective thickness of the front-facing armor. The turret, manufactured by F.H. Lloyd, had 280mm, 11 inches, thick armor designed to deflect 100mm APHE shells from Soviet T-54 or 55 tanks from close ranges. It was designed without a mantlet, an extra sheet of armor around the base of the gun at the turret to cover the gap through which the gun goes through, to get the maximum amount of gun depression for fighting in hull-down positions. The glacis plate was meant to be 120mm thick, sloped to 60 degrees, but this was thinned but given an even steeper slope angle that provided the same level of protection. For security reasons, prototypes had canvas covers to hide the mantletless design and a sheet metal box welded over the glacis plate to hide it from prying eyes. The driver sat front and center in the hull, in a semi-recumbent position to help reduce the profile of the glacis plate.
Sorry, a semi-what now?
Recumbent, basically like the driver in an F1 car, almost laying down. The rest of the crew, gunner, loader, and commander sat in the turret. On the turret exterior there was a large searchlight with infrared capability in an armored housing on the left side. This turret was armed with 120mm L11 rifled fully stabled gun, which in itself was upgraded over the years, ending with the A5 version. Each improving range, accuracy and durability. Unlike other tanks, Chieftain's ammunition was split into 3 separate parts as opposed to a single all-in-one shell. The projectile, the propellant bag charge and a detonating charge. This shell-less system circumvented issues of what to do with the empty shell casing after it fired. You either had to have that big lump of hot metal rolling around inside the vehicle, or get rid of it out the turret. An ejection port creates a targetable weak spot in what should be the toughest part of the vehicle. In the past, when tank guns were smaller, the spent shell casings rolling around the inside wasn't too much of an issue. But the vulnerability to ammunition taking a direct hit and causing a catastrophic explosion was always the biggest threat to the crew. To reduce the likelihood of a catastrophic detonation, the bags were stored in wet storage containers around the turret that were pressurized and filled with a mix of water and glycol, stopping the bags exploding if incoming fire penetrated the fighting compartment of the turret. The bagged ammunition concept had many benefits, and despite it being 2 parts needing loaded into the breech, a well-trained loader could get the gun ready faster than other tanks with one-piece rounds of similar sizes, as it was half the physical size and weight. Another option that was considered but soon dismissed for the bags was a liquid propellant, but the injection pump for it to work was so large no tank could carry it. Chieftain was built around its gun. Its size, recoil space and balancing mass dictated an overhang on the turret rear to put things like radio sets, fire control electronics and ammunition storage. There were also simple baskets mounted to the exterior of this part of the turret for external storage. I threw in a little what is meant to be a camouflage net for a bit of character. Chieftain's fire control system, once upgraded, was state-of-the-art for the time. Early Chieftains had a Marconi FV, a GCE Mark for fire control system. It utilized a 50 caliber ranging rifle above the main gun with an effective range up to 2,400 meters, or 2,600 yards in old money, at which point the tracer coating would burn out, although the explosive tip would still make a splash on impact. Both the commander and gunner had aiming optics with power from 1 times up to 10 times and 15 times in later marks. The commander could rotate their cupola to get on target, and then make the turret rotate to the same point, bringing the gun to bear, and then go looking for another target, or even fire the gun themselves for speed, or if the gunner was unable to do so. This hunter-killer system was brought over from the Conqueror and still exists to this day on modern tanks. The commander had excellent all-around view with the 8 other vision ports around the cupola that didn't provide any magnification. From the 1970s, the ranging rifle was replaced with a Bar and Stroud LF-2 laser rangefinder with a range of up 10 kilometers, 6.2 miles. Once paired with the fire control system, target engagement and selection was way faster. This let Chieftain gunners unleash the full power of the L11 gun and hit targets at much longer ranges, further than enemy tanks could fire from. The electronically controlled infrared filtered searchlight on the left side of the turret had a range of up to 1.5 kilometers, 0.93 miles, which was a long range for such a system. Comparable Soviet systems barely got up to half of this range. Later Marks received the Marconi Improved Fire Control System, IFCS, using a digital ballistic computer. These upgrades were rolled out across all tanks but took until the end of 1980 to complete, when some but not the majority of Chieftains received the Thermal Optic Gunner Sight, or TOGS for short, replacing the infrared searchlight. Another signature feature of Chieftain was...
Oh, I know this. It had a kettle in it.
True, but not what I was going to say. Chieftain was fully designed to fight in an NBC environment. The turret, once closed, was almost fully airtight. On the rear of the turret was a full filtration system that removed toxins and radioactive fallout from the air before pumping it into the tank at a higher pressure than the outside, helping to prevent anything nasty get in via, say, the barrel itself. The boiling vessel was an important part of this. It would allow crews inside to stay inside the EMP-hardened tank with hot food and drinks for about a week. There was even a toilet inside, but it was only for use if the Cold War went hot and the crew was in a hot zone. Otherwise you left with your toffoli tissue and found a tree or dug a hole.
So the kettle was important to protecting the crew.
In a way, yes. It's still an important, rather famous design feature of Chieftain's successor, Challenger. To this day, it is still considered a crew's favorite thing about a tank. Ukrainian crews in donated Challenger tos love the boiling vessel. Now, we get round to Chieftain's curse. Its engine. Originally Chieftain was planned to have a Rolls-Royce V8 petrol engine, but there was a 2-year delay with this engine. Along with the NATO requirement to field multi-fuel engine, the V8 was dropped in favor of an engine that was yet to begin development. Many would argue this was a big mistake. Leyland developed the L60 engine, a 2-stroke intended to be a multi-fuel platform that could use any fuel. In reality, if you ran it on anything other than diesel, it wouldn't be happy, but even good quality diesel wasn't a guarantee for good performance. It was chronically underpowered and incredibly unreliable. It had a staggering 90% failure rate. 90%. Problems from constant leaks, cylinder headlining failures, fan drive failures. Improvements were made and the L60A was better, but increased the weight. Power at the drive sprocket went up to 850 brake horsepower, increasing top speed on road, but cross-country performance was still lacking. Generally, by the end of Chieftain's service life and its Mark 10 and 11 standards, it was the best it could ever be, short of throwing a brand new engine into it. Which they did do with 900E prototypes, installing a 900 brake horsepower Rolls-Royce Condor engine. It was capable of firing APFSDS rounds like other NATO tanks. Although it was a unique projectile not compatible with smoothbore guns, it was at least very accurate. 10s and 11s also had the Stillbrew armor package, capable of deflecting 115mm Soviet APFSDS rounds. Chieftain didn't see combat with the British Army. It stood guard on the West German border, waiting for a fight that never came. Export sales were excellent, but reviews were mixed. Chieftain saw combat in the Iran-Iraq War and the Battle of the Bridges in Kuwait in the fighting before the First Gulf War started. These were all based on the older Mark 3 and 5 standards from the 60s and 70s compared to later Mark 10 and 11s and early Challenger 1s at the time. They didn't do well against more modern Russian armor, with many destroyed or captured during these conflicts. The gun was still effective, the armor and engines weren't anymore. Chieftain is often looked upon poorly, mainly due to its engine performance. If the engine worked, it was still considered slow compared to American M60 Patton and German Leopard 1s. However, M60S and Leopard 1s were lighter armored and only carried a 105mm gun. They were designed for high maneuver warfare, moving quickly to outflank enemy forces or race to meet a changing Soviet tank formations. Chieftain wasn't. It was designed to move to a pre-planned position where it could hide, hull down until targets came into range. It would pop up, fire and duck back down. They would repeat this several times until it was safe to fall back more pre-planned positions and repeat the process. Chieftain was a sniper, not a shock trooper. Crews, from what I can gather, were liked by their crews, apart from the engine. It was well protected, had a great gun and was comfortable by tank standards anyway. If you want to see a Chieftain today, there are many on display at museums such as the Tank Museum, which has several models and some still run. Some are in private ownership, including a one-whistling diesel of YouTube fame, which he bought from Mr. Hughes, who has a whole load of videos on Chieftains here on YouTube. Well, that's it, folks. We have come to the end of our ride in this fantastic tank. I would normally ask for you to do the usual YouTube pleasantries, but today a like will do. I am needing to take an extended from production to deal with things in the background. I know it's only been a year, but I hope you have enjoyed the journeys we've taken together. I do intend to be back and continue by moving into the modern age. Until we see each other again, for the final time, we won't be brewing up, we will dismount and be dismissed. Bye bye.
Bye, bye.